Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. If you love creepy tales and bone-chilling mysteries, make sure to subscribe and join our haunted community. It began, as most things in the realm of academia do, with an invitation. An elegant cream-colored envelope slipped into my dormitory mailbox during the first week of autumn. The paper smelled faintly of bergamot, and the text, written in an archaic serif font, read, "You are cordially invited to join the Owls of Hesperia. An inaugural meeting will be held this Friday at midnight in the library's north wing. Attendance is compulsory. Silence is sacred." It was unsigned, of course. I'd heard whispers of such societies, secret enclaves for the intellectually insatiable, the spiritually curious, the dangerously ambitious, but I thought them nothing more than campus folklore, stories exchanged over coffee to romanticize the long gray winters. Yet, when Friday arrived, I found myself standing before the heavy oaken doors of the north wing, feeling the weight of expectation and curiosity pressing down on me. I could have walked away, but I didn't. The north wing was seldom used. The university claimed it was undergoing renovations, though no such work had been evident in years. I pushed open the creaking door and stepped into an overwhelming silence, the kind that thrums in your ears and makes you question if you're truly alone. A single lantern illuminated a narrow staircase spiraling downward. The invitation had said nothing about a basement, but I descended anyway. At the bottom of the staircase was a long corridor lined with bookshelves. These weren't ordinary books. Their spines were cracked leather, the titles embossed in fading gold letters, some in languages I couldn't recognize. The air was damp, smelling faintly of mildew and something metallic. It felt like the kind of place where secrets came to die, or worse, to live forever. The corridor opened into a circular chamber. A table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by high-backed chairs. 7 individuals were already seated, their faces partially obscured by the low, flickering light of a single candle. No one spoke. I hesitated in the doorway. A figure at the head of the table gestured toward the empty chair. They were dressed in a professor's robe, though their face was concealed by a smooth, featureless mask that gleamed like polished bone. The others wore similar masks, but theirs were adorned with strange, intricate carvings. "Take your seat," the leader said. Their voice was calm, measured, yet it carried an undeniable authority. I obeyed. The leader produced a slim, black journal and placed it on the table. "Tonight, we begin with a question. What are you willing to sacrifice for knowledge?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. No one answered, not at first. But then, one by one, the masked figures began to speak. "I sacrificed my family," said one. "My freedom," said another. "My health." Each confession felt like a stone dropping into an abyss, the echoes reverberating in my chest. When it was my turn, I hesitated. I had come here out of curiosity, but now it felt as though the room itself was demanding something from me. I don't know yet," I admitted. The leader tilted their head, as though appraising me. Then they opened the black journal and slid it across the table. "Write your answer here." The pages of the journal were blank, but the moment my pen touched the paper, the ink seemed to flow of its own accord. Words I didn't consciously think appeared on the page. My sanity. The room grew colder. The candle flickered violently, and for a moment, I thought it might go out entirely. The leader closed the journal, satisfied. "Your offering has been noted." The meeting continued in a way that defied logic. Discussions of philosophy, mathematics, and ancient texts blurred into something more abstract. Concepts I couldn't fully grasp, as though they were being transmitted not to my mind, but to some deeper, more primal part of me. I lost track of time, of place, of self. When I finally emerged from the north wing, the sun was rising. My head throbbed with a dull ache, and my hands trembled as though I had touched something forbidden. I resolved not to return. But the next invitation arrived the following week, and despite every rational impulse, I went back. The meetings became a routine, a ritual. Each week I felt myself unraveling a little more, the boundaries between what was real and what wasn't growing thinner. My dreams became vivid, haunting. I saw places I had never been, spoke languages I had never learned. I stopped attending classes. My professors seemed not to notice. My friends grew distant. I stopped caring. Then came the final meeting. This time, the black journal was placed before me again. The leader, their mask now gleaming with a sinister, almost organic sheen, spoke directly to me. Your sacrifice has been accepted. It is time to fulfill your part of the covenant. I opened the journal, and the pages were filled with writing. Not mine, but written in a hand that was unnervingly familiar. Words upon words describing events I couldn't remember, deeds I couldn't fathom. But they bore my name. They bore me. The leader extended their hand, and for the first time, I noticed how inhuman it looked. Fingers too long, joints bending in ways that defied anatomy. I wanted to run, to scream, but I couldn't move. The others began to chant, a low, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. Knowledge demands payment, the leader said, their voice resonating in my skull. And now, you belong to it. The candle went out. When I woke, I was alone in the basement. The masks, the people, the table, everything was gone. But the journal remained. Its pages were blank again, save for the final entry, written in my own hand. I have seen the price of knowing, and I have paid it in full. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at those words. When I finally left, the north wing was sealed shut. The university denied any knowledge of it ever existing. That was 10 years ago. To this day, I cannot read a book without hearing their voices, cannot close my eyes without seeing that room. I've tried to forget, but knowledge, once gained, cannot be unlearned. It festers, it consumes. And now, I am here telling you this story because I can feel the invitation coming again. The owls of Hesperia do not forget their own, and neither should you. There's something hypnotic about ivy-laden halls under gray skies, isn't there? They draw you in like a promise, whispering tales of greatness, legacy, and secrets hidden beneath mahogany desks and stone archways. When I first stepped onto the grounds of St. Castor's College, I felt that pull, a magnetic hum in the air. It wasn't just a school, it was a world apart, steeped in tradition, drenched in mystery. But if I had known then what I know now, I'd have never set foot inside. I was 19 when I transferred to St. Castor's, a mid-year replacement for a student who'd left abruptly. No one told me why she'd gone, and I didn't ask. The gossip was intoxicating but elusive, an undertow of whispers about her crisis of spirit or academic misconduct. Everyone had their own version. What I do know is that her name disappeared from the registrar and her room became mine, perched in the shadow of the bell tower. From the very first night, it felt off. Not haunted, don't roll your eyes at me, but alive in some unsettling way. The walls seemed to breathe, the floorboards groaned like aching bones, and the air, it carried a damp, metallic tang, like old blood and rain. I'd wake up at odd hours, certain I'd heard faint scratching at my door. I'd check, nothing. Then I found the vault. It started innocently enough, a paper for my Studies in Classical Thought seminar. I'd chosen to write about the founder of St. Castor's, Dr. Elias Morcant, a brilliant but enigmatic 18th century scholar. His works were stored in the library's restricted section, accessible only by special permission. I charmed my way in, or so I thought, with a carefully worded plea to the librarian, Ms. Eddington, a severe woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a Victorian photograph. She gave me a brass key and strict instructions. No photocopies, no notebooks, only pencil and paper, and do not, under any circumstances, enter the antechamber. The antechamber. Naturally, I'd never heard of it. St. Castor's Library was renowned for its labyrinthine architecture, with staircases that led to nowhere, and hidden reading nooks tucked behind sliding bookshelves. I assumed the antechamber was just another storied corner, sealed off for reasons of preservation or redundancy. But the moment I stepped into the restricted section, I knew I had to find it. Morcant's papers were fascinating but disjointed. Dense treatises on metaphysics interspersed with cryptic notes in Latin, Greek, and something else. A language I couldn't identify. One phrase kept appearing in the margins. Non omnis moriar. Not all of me shall die. It was both poetic and unnerving, especially when paired with diagrams that looked less like academic doodles and more like anatomical schematics. Human schematics. I became obsessed. I'd linger in the library until closing, poring over those pages by the dim light of the green desk lamps. Then, one evening, I found it, a passage scrawled in what appeared to be rust-colored ink. The vault lies beyond the antechamber. Only the worthy may enter. Only the curious may see. Ms. Eddington's warning rang in my ears, but curiosity, well, you understand. I started probing, testing bookshelves for hidden latches, scanning the floor for irregularities. After 2 hours, I found it. A narrow door concealed behind a tapestry depicting the rape of Persephone. It opened into a cramped spiral staircase that smelled of mildew and something sharper, more acrid. My heartbeat quickened as I descended. The antechamber was nothing like I expected. It was stark, clinical, with walls of polished black stone that seemed to absorb light. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it, a single artifact, a tarnished silver chalice. Beside it lay an inscription etched into the stone floor. To drink is to know. To know is to become. It felt like a dare. Against every shred of better judgment, I lifted the chalice. Inside was a viscous liquid, dark, almost black, with a faint coppery scent. I told myself it was some academic prank, a relic of an old initiation ritual. But as the liquid touched my lips, it burned, searing a path down my throat and into my chest. My vision blurred, my knees buckled, and for a moment, I thought I might die. When I came to, I was no longer alone. The room was crowded, figures shrouded in shadows, their faces indistinct. They didn't speak, but their presence pressed against me, a cacophony of thoughts and whispers invading my mind. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, as they poured their memories into me. Centuries of secrets, betrayals, and horrors. I saw Morcant, standing in that very chamber, his eyes black and empty, his hands slick with blood. I saw students, dozens of them, drinking from the chalice, their bodies writhing as they transformed into something inhuman. And then I saw myself, my reflection in the polished stone floor. My eyes, once brown, now gleamed a sickly gold. My veins pulsed with a dark light, spidering beneath my skin. I stumbled out of the antechamber, out of the library, and back to my dorm, where I locked myself away for 3 days. I thought I was safe. I thought I could forget. But the whispers haven't stopped. They grow louder every night, demanding I return to the vault, to complete what I started. My body is changing. I can feel it. My heartbeat is slower. My appetite wanes. And my reflection, it's not mine anymore. I don't know how much time I have left. I don't even know if I'm still human. But if you're listening to this, take my advice. Stay away from Saint, Casters. And if you ever find yourself in its library, do not, under any circumstances, drink from the chalice. I never thought my fascination with the dark allure of academia would lead me to where I am now, recounting this to you. It's not a ghost story, no, but something far more tangible and far more disturbing. It started in my final year at Hawthorne College, an ivy-clad institution so drenched in tradition and secrecy that it felt like stepping into another century. The campus had a suffocating charm, heavy oak doors, labyrinthine libraries, and professors who seemed as ancient as the books they assigned. I was an English literature major, predictably brooding, perpetually coffee-fueled, and hopelessly obsessed with T.S. Eliot. My friends used to joke that I was born in the wrong century. They weren't entirely wrong. One evening I was holed up in the basement of the college library, which was affectionately nicknamed the Crypt because of its cold, damp air and endless rows of neglected books. I was working on my thesis, something pretentious about the interplay of despair and enlightenment in modernist poetry. The librarian, a wiry man named Mr. Craddock, knew me well enough to let me stay after hours. He handed me the keys with his usual grumble about locking up properly. "Don't go poking where you shouldn't," he warned, his milky eyes lingering on me longer than I liked. I brushed him off with a laugh. If only I'd listened. Around midnight, I discovered it. A door at the very back of the crypt, hidden behind a stack of old microfilm machines. It was unmarked and looked older than the rest of the library, the wood warped and discolored. Something about it felt wrong. Too ordinary to be important, yet too deliberate to be ignored. Curiosity got the better of me. The key Mr. Craddock had given me didn't fit, but the door wasn't locked. It creaked open to reveal a narrow staircase spiraling downward, the stone steps slick with moss and moisture. I hesitated only briefly before descending, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, I found a room. It wasn't large, maybe the size of a professor's office, but the walls were lined with bookshelves that seemed to be carved directly out of the stone. A single desk stood in the center, and on it, a peculiar book bound in dark leather. No title, no markings, just a faint, unpleasant smell, like something left too long in the damp. I opened it. The pages weren't paper, but some kind of parchment, rough and uneven. The text was handwritten in an ink that shimmered faintly under the flickering light of the desk lamp I'd brought with me. The language was archaic, but not entirely unfamiliar. Latin, though riddled with strange glyphs and symbols I didn't recognize. What drew me in wasn't the text, but the illustrations. Detailed anatomical drawings, but wrong. Human figures with impossible proportions. Limbs that bent in ways they shouldn't. Eyes where there shouldn't be eyes. Some were skinned, their muscles and veins meticulously rendered. Others looked as if they had been caught mid-transformation into something not quite human. I couldn't look away. The longer I stared, the more I felt a strange pressure behind my eyes, as though the images were etching themselves directly into my brain. And then I saw it, my name, written in the same shimmering ink at the bottom of one of the pages. It wasn't possible. The ink wasn't dry, and the handwriting, it was mine. I slammed the book shut and bolted out of the room, my heart hammering in my chest. Back in my dorm, I tried to convince myself it was a prank, some elaborate joke set up by one of my classmates, but the dream I had that night made it impossible to dismiss. In it, I was back in that room. The book was open in front of me, but this time, I wasn't reading. I was writing. My hand moved across the page as if guided by someone else, inscribing symbols I didn't understand, but somehow knew were dangerous. When I looked up, the figures from the illustrations were in the room with me, watching, silent, expectant. I woke up drenched in sweat. The image of their eyes burned into my memory. But it didn't stop there. Over the next few weeks, I began to see them everywhere, reflected in windows, lingering at the edges of my vision, disappearing the moment I turned to look. The worst was in class. I was giving a presentation on Eliot's The Wasteland when I saw one of them standing at the back of the lecture hall, tall, gaunt, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It was watching me, and for a moment, so was everyone else. The professor, the students, they were all staring, unblinking, their faces blank. Then it was gone, and everything snapped back to normal. I stumbled through the rest of my presentation, my voice trembling. No one mentioned anything unusual afterward, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they'd all seen it too. I stopped going to class. I stopped eating, sleeping. My friends, the few I had left, begged me to talk to someone. But how could I explain what was happening? How could I tell them about the whispers I heard in the dead of night? The sensation of invisible eyes crawling over my skin. Desperation drove me back to the library, back to the door, the staircase, the room. The book was still there, waiting for me. This time, I didn't hesitate. I opened it to the page with my name and began to write. The words came unbidden, pouring out of me like water from a broken dam. The more I wrote, the quieter the whispers became. By the time I filled the page, they had stopped altogether. But it wasn't over. I'd merely traded one torment for another. The figures still watch me, but now they're closer, clearer. I've seen their faces, and they've seen mine. They're waiting for something, though I don't know what. I've tried to leave Hawthorne, but every attempt ends the same way. The bus breaks down. The train is delayed. My car refuses to start. It's as if the town itself won't let me go. And the people here, they're different now. They smile too much, their teeth too white, their eyes too bright. Sometimes I catch them watching me the way the figures do, with that same silent expectancy. I don't know how much longer I can take this. The whispers have started again, louder this time, more insistent. The book calls to me, its pages blank and waiting. If you're hearing this, it means I've written my last page. Do yourself a favor. Stay away from Hawthorne College. And if you ever find a door that shouldn't be there, don't open it, no matter how curious you are. Some secrets aren't meant to be uncovered. Some knowledge isn't worth the price.